Amazing. Cool. So like I mentioned, if you're able to come off camera, let me see your beautiful faces. You can see me. We have a new background, bright yellow, so I stand out a little bit more. But we do try to make these sessions pretty conversational. So as I'm going through things, if you have a question, feel free to either type it into the chat window or you can click on that little react button at the bottom and raise your hand, and that will alert me that there's a question, and I'll make sure that you have the ability to ask it and get an answer for that. So for those of you who do not know me, I am Jeff. I lead marketing here at Reejig, and I also play a big part in building our internal AI tools. So various agents, workflows, personal GPTs, things like that for us to use as an organization. I've been building agents and playing with AI for almost 3 years now, so I kind of feel like a dinosaur as it relates to the AI stuff. But what I think is really interesting about me and my role, and something that I say week after week, is that it should prove to all of you that regardless of your background, you can become a builder, right? We are big believers that the future belongs to builders and not necessarily the platforms. And our goal for this series is to get everybody here comfortable enough and curious enough to feel as though they can go in and start playing around and either building agents, building workflows, or even just getting a little bit more efficient with their personal use of AI. So that's the goal for this session, is just to demonstrate that it's really not that difficult and have all of you guys go out and start building things. And my hope and dream is that a future session, I have one of you guys show us what you build. Like that'll be great. I won't have to prepare. I can sit back and enjoy. But for this week, we'll go ahead and we're going to build an HR policy agent. So I'm going to close the poll on my end and we'll keep rocking and rolling. So I always try not to make this like a Reejig infomercial or a demo or anything like that, and it's going to be the case here. But I do for people who are not maybe aware of Reejig and what we do and what we are and who we are. I wanted to just sort of preface this by saying Reejig, we are a work intelligence platform for the AI era. And what we do is we allow some of the world's best companies to make sense of their AI transformation, right? And make sense of this crazy world that we live in where people are trying to reinvent work with AI. And what I love about my job is that I get to have conversations and see inside all of these great companies that are using Reejig to help bring AI into their organizations in a very responsible and bold way. And by having these relationships with these great companies, we're able to see what they're doing, see what challenges they're facing. And across our customer base, I mean, you'll see these companies lie across pretty much every industry that's out there. But what I find to be the most interesting is that they typically have the same questions around how they should bring AI into their organization, and they have the same challenges trying to answer those questions. And I think from a Reejig perspective, it's amazing that we have a product that answers those questions of where they should get started, what they should be doing, how do they know if they're having success with the AI that they're bringing in. Um, oops, and we will dive in. So, those of you who are returning to this session, you've seen this slide a few times now, but going back to those questions that we hear from these organizations as to like, hey, I don't necessarily know what like bringing AI into the organization is. I don't know where to get started. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to tell if it's working. We had those same questions back in the day, right? And from speaking to a lot of our customers and a lot of great companies that are out there, we now feel as though we have pretty definitive answer as to how they can wrap their heads around those questions. And we typically will provide what we call the Rejig Reinvention Flywheel as our blueprint for bringing the AI in a way that's going to set the bar and provide sort of steps that will allow them to be more successful than maybe they've been previously in their other initiatives, right? You've heard me say a few times now this idea of pilot purgatory. If you look back a few years, companies were trying to use AI to accomplish different things, but they weren't really having a lot of success. And it was really because they just didn't know what they were trying to achieve. They didn't know what they were trying to unlock. So they were really just sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. So we've developed this Reejig reinvention flywheel to sort of serve as the guidepost for organizations to make sure that they're following a strategic framework that's going to get them to activation in a way where they can prove out the outcomes that they're trying to achieve through AI. And even though the flywheel has eight sort of little spokes, I guess is the right word, what we're going to do for this session is we're going to focus on the first half, so the first four, because those are the critical components to get started with reinventing work through AI. And those spokes or those components are going to start with this idea of making work visible. And I'm going to actually show you what that looks like in the Reejig platform, so you'll understand what we mean there. But it's this idea that AI is not here to replace people, it's here to replace work, right? And if you think about what work actually is and you take it down to the atomic unit, work is really just a collection of tasks and subtasks. So if you actually don't know what work is taking place or who's doing it within your organization, you're going to have a really difficult time understanding where you should be bringing in AI to either augment or automate that work. So first important step, we'll show you that in a second. The second is this idea around focusing where it matters. So if you have all the work visible, now you need to sort of look at that work and see where it makes the most sense to bring AI into the fold. And Reejig, we do an AI impact analysis across all of the work that's happening in your organization, and we allow you to sort of zero in on the tasks and subtasks that are most ripe for augmentation or automation. But typically, if you didn't have Reejig, you should still think about the work that's taking place and then try to categorize that work to determine what part of that work or what are the tasks that are driving revenue? What are the tasks that are maybe removing costs? What are the tasks that you just don't like to do, right? Or what are the tasks that sort of are reducing risk around the business? If you can sort of categorize those tasks into those buckets, that also gives you a great starting off point as to what you should be either automating or augmenting or building in these workflows. And then the final bit is you need to sort of reinvent or re-engineer what that work is with either full AI automation or a combination of agents doing some tasks or subtasks, humans doing other subtasks. So this idea of understanding the work because you can see it, understanding the workflow, then seeing where AI can plug in, that's going to on its own set you up for far greater success than just coming in and just throwing spaghetti at the wall. Cool. So that being said, I'm going to dive into building this agent. And the agent that we're going to build today, like I mentioned earlier, is I would consider it to be a pretty simple agent, but it's one that's actually really, really valuable. And this idea for what we're going to build today actually came from one of the attendees of one of our earlier sessions. They said, "Hey, like in the future, could you potentially build something that would answer like general or basic HR questions, right?" And for my time working with a lot of HR teams, that seems to be something that's not only a time suck, but like would be an example of like no joy work, right? Where you're getting pinged constantly by employees asking questions like, "Hey, can I take parental leave?" Or "How many days off do we get?" Right? Things that are just really in the employee handbook. But we all know a lot of people won't take the time to go ahead and read that employee handbook. So I'm going to switch over to the Reejig platform. As I'm doing that, Kelly, are there any questions in the chat that people are asking?
No, you're good to go, Jess.
Good to go. Cool. Are there any questions that anyone wants to ask before I dive into the Reejig and then to the agent build? I'll give you guys a second to either raise your hand or type anything in there. Otherwise, I'm going to keep cranking. So what you're seeing on the screen in front of you here, this is actually the Reejig platform. And when we talked about that Reejig flywheel, the reinvention flywheel, we talked about this idea of making work visible. So in this platform, that's essentially what we're doing, right? So based on our work ontology, which is our proprietary data, we're able to map the work down to the task and subtask level. that's taking place across your organization. And we're able to organize it in a way where you can see it by job family, by roles within those families, et cetera. If you wanted to look at skills, you can do all that. But the general thinking behind how this serves as a tool to help us understand where we should be automating and augmenting or what we should be building is pretty basic, right? It's this idea of we've made the work visible, which was the critical first step. And then we've applied this AI potential or this AI impact analysis across these tasks to let you know, hey, 43% of the work that goes into completing this task could be automated or augmented with AI. So the way that we see a lot of companies leveraging this view is they'll come on in and they'll say, well, look, there's an opportunity here for us to go ahead and look at this, what is a manual workflow to start and find opportunities where we can now automate or build agents to complete some of these various tasks. So for today, like I mentioned, we would say, hey, this task is, somebody needs to answer these basic HR questions. How do we go ahead and determine whether there is high impact for AI to automate that? The answer is yes. There's tremendous opportunity for the AI to automate that. And then we would go in and identify exactly what we're going to do. So that being said, this is Reejig, makes the work visible. It'll show you the tasks, the subtasks. It'll tell you which should be automated. And what's also pretty neat is we'll actually take it a step further and we'll match those tasks with agents that are already built within your organization. Or if you don't have an agent that's already built to do it, we'll actually provide you the blueprint of how to build that agent. But for today, the blueprint is going to come from me, and we're going to build an HR policy agent. So let me move on over to our good friend, Microsoft Copilot Studio. So I'm going to pause for a second before I start building. Any questions? Kelly, anything in there, or are we good to keep cranking?
No, we're good. I'll let you know. We're good.
Okay. Very good. Sweet. So we're going to use our old friend, Microsoft Copilot Studio. This I consider to be a pretty easy to use no code, low code agent builder. And when I say no code, low code, what I mean is that you don't have to have a technical know-how. You just need to know how to speak English, right? Or to type English because you can, in very simple terms, tell it what you want to build, and it will do a really, really nice job of building that agent for you. Now, if you wanted to build more complex agents or more complex workflows, you may want to move to a different tool, but you could also do it here in Copilot Studio and actually connect agent to agent. And I'll briefly touch on what that would look like in this session. But this is a great starting point. And I'm curious because every week I always have some people that say they have access to Copilot Studio or that they've actually used it. I have a lot of people that say they don't have access to it. So if you can do me a favor, just in the chat, can you just type whether or not you have either ever used Microsoft Copilot Studio or have access to Microsoft Copilot Studio? Because that also will allow me to sort of orient myself around whether I need to be very specific to Copilot Studio or I'll take it a little bit more broad so that you can apply the methodology to other builders. And I'm actually going to turn on the chat on my side here and hide it over in the corner so I can see. And it looks like no access, no access, never used it, don't have access. So for those of you who don't have access, um, and you want to try playing around with it, you could request access at work. Or if you were to sign on through a personal account, I believe you might be able to get access to it. But again, the same methodology and principles that I'm going to go over will apply to other agent builders. So you don't have to use Microsoft Copilot Studio. We just like to demonstrate on it because we found that a lot of our customers, a lot of these like enterprises, this is what they have because a lot of them are sort of Microsoft shops. Cool. So starting out point, we're in Copilot Studio. We are going to go ahead and we are going to go into the agent side of things. So Copilot Studio has this agents area. It also has this flows area. The difference being agents is where you're going to build your agents. Flows is where you're going to build like automated workflows with triggers and things like that. And there is a little bit of overlap between the two. But for this, we're going to get started by building an agent and we're going to click create blank agent. And Microsoft Copilot Studio is known to be a little bit slow in the setup process. Typically, what it does when you click publish or click create new agent is it's actually provisioning this agent across the enterprise. So it's setting up the framework so that if and when you love your agent and you publish it, it's going to be accessible across various channels in your organization that you define. So this provisioning takes a few seconds. It should boot up in a moment. And once it's booted up, well, it can actually then start building the agent. And while I wait for it to do that, oh, it did it. The first step, and I always say week after week, very, very, very important step is we need to give our agent a name. And I am guilty as anyone in the past. I used to come up with terrible names for agents and things of that sort because I used to think that only I needed to know what it was or what it did. But when we're talking about building agents or leveraging AI across your organization, you have to remember that these tools and these things that we're building are going to be accessible to a lot of different people within your organization. So you need to be descriptive as possible when you're naming these things so that somebody besides yourself that comes in can have a really clear understanding of what it is this specific agent or workflow actually does. So here we're building, like I said, this HR policy. AMA is Ask Me Anything for those who are in my age bracket and are not on Reddit all the time. And then what this is going to do is it's going to save an HR manager's time by answering the questions that typically get asked over and over and over again to them by essentially allowing the agent to answer the questions for them. So that's what this is going to do. So we're going to save that. And we now have the start of an agent. Next step is going to be to choose our agent model. So Microsoft Copilot Studio is essentially model agnostic. And by that, I mean it gives you the opportunity to use a variety of different models. I believe you can also bring your own models in as well. But for us and in this demonstration, we have the option of choosing from OpenAI models, which is the ChatGPT models, or the Anthropic models, which are the Claude models. The model that you choose is going to be very dependent on what you're actually looking to accomplish and achieve with the agent. But for things that seem to be relatively simple, you would use one of the lesser or more cost-effective models. So for this one, we're going to use GPT-4.1 because this is more or less just going to be a knowledge recall agent, which is like sort of like a category or family of agents that are just going out there, finding data that you defined, parsing the data to find an answer, and then just recalling that answer. Very, very simple. We don't need to use these like robust, slower, more expensive reasoning models. We'll get perfect results using GPT 4.1. If you are building an agent that is going to be doing some complex reasoning or doing deep research or maybe pulling in disparate data sources from all over the place, whether it's your internal data stack, external MCPs, or doing web research. In those examples, you'd probably want to use one of the other models, probably either Auto, which is a great one if you're unsure. So if you really don't know what model to use, you can use GPT-5 Auto, or you can use Opus, which is going to be a more complex model. And the Claude models right now are like the models du jour, right? They're the models that are very popular today. I love Claude models. They do a really great job on output, but again, it's going to be a personal preference. And what I would recommend for everybody here is start thinking or doing some research on just understanding the differences in the models and understanding what certain models do better than others, because I believe that we're heading to a place where we're going to start seeing a lot of people building workflows that are going to be using several different models. So they'll use simple models for simple tasks, but that output will feed into more of these complex reasoning models. So you're actually going to start seeing a lot more agent orchestration where you're not just standardizing across like a GPT-4.1 across the entire workflow. You're going to be using model dependence, for each step. which I think is really interesting, and we're getting there, and that's going to become more popular. So again, for this one, GPT 4.1 is going to work. The next thing is we need to provide the instructions for this agent. When I say instructions, think of the instructions as just a prompt, right? And I said this last week, and we dove into this a little bit more last week, but your agents are only going to be as good as your prompts. And in the early days of people who are diving into this sort of AI world, prompting is going to be the one area where you're going to see the biggest growth as long as you're willing to take the time to learn, iterate, and experiment and try different things. And in your early days, your prompts are probably going to be relatively short. As you become more comfortable and more experienced, your prompts are going to become relatively long. And for me, when I typically write prompts, it's like I'm writing War and Peace because I'm making sure that the AI has all of the instructions that it needs to produce output that's going to satisfy my expectations. And again, it's only going to be able to do that if I set those expectations for it, right? AI is brilliant. It can do a lot of different things, but again, it's only as good as the instructions that you give it. It's only as good as the examples that you tell it. You want to see results that it look like. It's only as good as you telling it what you don't want to see, right? And as you start building these prompts and training these agents and doing all of these, it's also very important to let it know what you think of the output, right? So I always tell a story where, I'll do a lot of work, I'll get an output, and then I'll say, "Hey, Claude," or "Hey, ChatGPT, give this output a rating, from 0 to 10." And it'll come back and it'll say, "Oh, this is an 8 out of 10. This is great." I'll then say, "Amazing. Let's make this a 10 out of 10," right? I'm constantly trying to iterate to improve the output of the model. Also, I'll get to the hand that's raised in 1 second. Also, I will always give it feedback on how I feel about the output. So, personal use of AI, it gives me something that's great. Make sure you tell it it's great, right? If you don't think it's great, make sure you say, "Hey, this is good, but I think this will make it better." That's going to help train it to provide the output that you're looking for. So, yes, so hand raised. It's not
That's
telling me
me,
who's raising
Jeff.
their hand. Oh, it's you. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. We have a question in the chat from Laura. What are your thoughts on combining a knowledge recall agent and a more complex reasoning agent in one using Copilot Studio?
Yeah, I think it's great, right? And I think that that's now, it was Laura, right? Laura that asked that question, I
Yep.
think. So, Laura, yes, that is now starting to get into this realm of like systems thinking, which is going to ultimately be, I think, where we're all going to be taking our knowledge, where it's amazing. Let's use an agent to, and I think that's what you're saying. Let's make an agent to pull some basic knowledge, and then let's take that knowledge and feed that to another agent that can do more complex reasoning. So I think that that's very, very smart thing to do. I've built a lot of agents or a lot of workflows that do that very thing, where either it's my meeting notes where I just want it to just go, "Hey, go pull something from my meeting notes," but then I'll use something more complex and maybe even a different model to now look at my meeting notes to provide me with what are my action items, and then using another reasoning model to tie action items to business outcomes to make sure that I'm focusing time and effort on the things that are going to move the needle. So hopefully that answered your question, Laura.
Jeff, there was a
Yep.
follow-up from Beth, which is good.
Yeah.
So would that be more of like a child agent?
Sort of, yeah. So if you're thinking about like agent orchestration, right? Like and it's funny because people will actually refer to these as like all these different things. Like you may have seen like articles or have heard people saying like, "I build a CEO agent," right? And the CEO agent manages a bunch of manager agents. And then those manager agents manage like a bunch of worker agents. So sort of. So you would have like your master, and then sort of all of the sub agents per se could be thought to be like a child agent. And if you were to actually map this out on like a whiteboard, like it would sort of look like a parent-child relationship. So yeah, like I've seen it called a million different things though, Beth. So if we want to call it child agents, we'll call it a child agent for
Only
now.
reason I ask is actually in Copilot Studio, you can add a child agent and then have
Yeah,
it instruct that way. So I've done
exactly.
that before where it's like, go do
Yep.
this first. via this child
Yeah.
agent and then come back and
And
don't
that's where it
move
gets really
forward.
interesting too, right? Where it's like you go do this, and then you're going to essentially hand off your work to another agent that's going to do something completely different. They're going to hand off their work. In one of these sessions, we'll build something that complex. It's just hard to do in a lot of time, and I like to talk, as you can tell. So so awesome. Any other questions here? No? Cool. So going back to the prompting, we have a prompting guide. I believe Kelly either will or has provided a link to download that guide in the chat. Download it. There's a cheat sheet. It makes it pretty clear in terms of how to structure a prompt. But again, we want to make a prompt for this HR policy agent. Um, every week when I talk about prompting, I always sort of advise people that are earlier in their journey to use like a prompt coach. I personally would use like a chat GPT or a Claude to help me refine and perfect my prompts, or at the very least, to format my prompts into either Markdown or something that I feel is going to allow me to get a better output. So what I would recommend if you have Microsoft Copilot, so I know a lot of you said you don't have access to Copilot Studio, but probably a lot of you will have access to Copilot. There is a prompt coach built in to Copilot, and prompt coach will allow you to just word vomit as to what you're trying to build, and then it will do all of the work behind the scenes to extract your word vomit and turn around a really beautifully written prompt. So for this example, this is always hard for me because when I try to demonstrate like normal language to create a prompt, it always looks like a prompt. But I did my best this week to try to just literally stream of consciousness write what I'm trying to do. So let me copy and paste it and let me walk you through it, what we're trying to do here. So first things first, I'm telling it what I want it to do. So it's like, hey, I need you to help me build this agent. Important to tell it where you're building the agent because it will actually adjust its output to format it in a way that's going to be best leveraged by the tool that you're using. So outside of Copilot Studio as an example, if you're using Claude and you're trying to build Claude skills, the structure of a Claude skill is going to be a little bit different than the structure that you would use in ChatGPT, a little bit different than the structure you'd use in Copilot Studio. So I'm telling it exactly what I'm looking to do. I'm telling it what I want it to do. So it's like, hey, this agent lives inside Copilot, answers everyday HR questions from employees, managers, recruiters, HR teams. It answers questions on leave, blah, 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 blah. It uses only approved HR documents. Very important to set the expectation from the knowledge standpoint. Explains clearly, consistently. It escalates edge cases to humans, etc. I tell it why this is high value. I tell it the likely impact that I think this is going to have for me. So I'm actually now saying, hey, here's why I think we should build it. This is as much for me as it is for the agent or for the prompt, right? Um, and then I'm telling it what it shouldn't do. So it's like, do not make up answers from outside HR policy documents. Do not answer questions about personal leave balances, all of that fun stuff. So very important to tell it what you want it to do. Equally as important to tell it what you don't want it to do. So cool, word vomit. I'm going to let it sort of create this prompt for me. It's going to take a second. It's going to line things up and it's going to tell me what it thinks about what I'm trying to do. I don't necessarily care. Thank you for telling me. Um, and it eventually will pump out a prompt. There we go. So here you go. So now you can see here, it's created the prompt in a very specific format, Markdown. This prompt is going to be really, really good for what we're trying to build. It's organizing it in a way that makes it very clear as to what the agent should do and not do. And it even has a nice little thing about its tone and role, right? Because if we're going to be creating an agent that we're going to ask employees to interact with, we need to think a little bit about that user experience as well. So then what I would do here is I would copy this prompt and then I would go back to Copilot Studio and I would paste it in. So let's do that real quick. So I'm going to copy it. We're going to go back here. We're going to add our instructions. We're going to paste it in and we're going to save that. It'll take a second for it to save. But at this point, we are almost done with an agent. But does anybody know the critical piece that we're missing? I'm going to quiz you. This is like law school. So in the chat, tell me what is the critical piece that we've not done yet? Anyone? Anyone? Knowledge. Exactly. Chelsea was first on the gun there. So yes, in our prompt, we've told it to make sure that it only uses specific knowledge, but we've not yet gone ahead and actually told it and added that knowledge where it can go and draw from. So what you're going to want to do, and probably before you start building it, is you want to make sure that you have your data sources or your knowledge organized in a way. And if this were a real example and we were, building something for the HR team at Reejig, Reejig may have a SharePoint site that has all of the HR policies, all of the information that we would need, employee handbooks, like everything just on a SharePoint. The larger enterprises, larger organizations, typically each function will have a SharePoint site where they just sort of store and make available all of this knowledge. If you have that, amazing. You could literally add the SharePoint site as your knowledge base, and the AI will be smart enough to know it's going to go into SharePoint, it's going to find what it needs. If you don't have a SharePoint site set up, you most likely then have a folder with a bunch of stuff. And this could be a Google Drive folder, it could be a OneDrive. In this example, what I did is I created a OneDrive folder that has all of these, sort of synthetic rejig HR policies. So this one folder has all of the different policies. As we come up with new policies or we update policies, they're always going to be in this folder. So this folder is going to be the source of the knowledge that we want the agent to pull its answers from. And I see a question from Bobby, and he says, "What if you have conflicting policies where there could be multiple answers?" And that's actually a great question, and it's definitely not a dumb answer or a dumb question because we do see that all the time. So in those cases, if let's say you're pretty confident that you have conflicting policies, what you would want to do is in your instructions for your agent, you would want to essentially tell it how to handle those instances. So you could say something, and I'm just making this up, but you could say in the instance where there is conflicting information on a policy, um, pull your answer from the most recently updated knowledge source. Like that's something that you can do. So you're trying to almost build in a guardrail through your prompt. That's probably the best way to do so in that instance. So hopefully that answers your question, Bobby. Awesome. Cool. Sweet. So I got the folder of policies, folder of good old policies here. What I would want to then do is I would want to go ahead and add that knowledge here. And since that is OneDrive, I'm going to click OneDrive. I'm going to browse my items. I'm going to look for my files. I'm going to go into, I think it was in here. There we go. And I'm just going to share the entire folder. And what that will do is if new things are added, I don't have to worry. It's just going to go to the folder. It's going to look for the data that it needs to answer the question. So I'm going to confirm that selection. I'm going to add it to the agent. And it's actually going to take probably several minutes for it to actually make that knowledge available for me to test. But because I am a good student, I built the same agent last night so that I didn't have to have you guys stare at a blank screen with a spinny wheel for a few minutes. So same exact agent. Here, the knowledge has been added and it is ready. The next thing that you want to do, if we remember our prompt and what we're trying to build, it has to answer our questions from our policies and nowhere else. So we want to make sure that it does not go out and do any research on the internet. So we want to make sure that this is toggled off. If we're building a different type of agent where, let's say, we want we built this a few weeks ago. We want it to go out every week and find top HR news or top AI news or things like that. there you'd want it to go out on the internet because that's the only way it's going to find the most relevant up-to-date information. So in that example, you would want to have web search on and tell that agent, hey, you can go out onto the web and find some knowledge or find some information that you can pull back in. But because we want to set the guardrails of saying we only want you to pull from our approved policies, you're going to make sure that that is turned off. So at this point, we have a working agent. Before I start testing it, I just want to walk you guys through some of the other things that you could do as you either build your own agents, modify things of that sort. So this area here, this tools area, this is going to be where you're able to add other tools. And I think it was fairly recently, Copilot Studio started to include this work IQ, which allows you to essentially um, have the AI go out across your entire organization's essentially like data stack. So it could pull in conversations from Teams, uh, Word docs, Excel sheets, all OneDrive, like SharePoint. Like this is just giving it blanket sort of authority to go out and accumulate all of that knowledge to pull in, which will also help it on the inference side of things as well. So that's available for you. You could also set up triggers. So a trigger could be, hey, I want this to run every Monday morning at 8 a.m. or I want this to run when this certain thing happens. You can set that up here. Because this is more or less like an ask me anything and you're going back and forth, we don't really need a trigger. People are going to be interacting when they want an answer. Here is where you would add other agents. So this is where you can add child agents, right? That you want to have handoffs of output. So you can add them here. And then if you really wanted to make this very user friendly, you could actually create suggested prompts, topics, all of those things. Again, it's not just the output that it provides. If you're really looking to build something, especially in the enterprise, you do want to think about that user experience and make it really easy for anyone to use. But we have an agent that should, in theory, now work. So I'm going to go ahead and test it. So you always want to test agents. Typically, if I were doing this in real life and doing it, I would do a lot of testing. And then the testing would allow me to go back to my instructions and actually fine tune my instructions to make sure that I get the output that I want. But for this one, let's just ask it a simple question. I think I joked around earlier and said, do I get parental leave? So let's ask the agent if I get to take time off as a new dad. And it's going to tell you how it's actually performing its work right here. So you'll see all of the sources that it's leveraging. And it says, yeah, cool. As a new father, I'm allowed to take time off. Amazing. And what's really cool about this is that it's also providing you a link to the actual source. So if I'm an employee, I'm asking, my HR policy agent these questions, really easy for me to now click and find the actual documentation that's answering that question as well, because now I can go in and probably get more information or answers to questions that I didn't even think to think. So that works. Let's ask it a question that it maybe um, should not be able to answer. So hopefully it's not able to answer what my current leave balance is. It shouldn't be able to. Let's see what it does. So it's going to go through that. It should say, okay, good, it worked. It says I can't provide that information. Call HR directly. And then if you remember, I didn't um, point this out, but in the instructions, I said that it should always ask, is there anything else that you need at the end? So it actually listened to what we wanted it to do. Again, to try to provide a little bit better user experience. So that's our agent. It works. It's amazing. We would then, once we're happy and satisfied, we would publish this agent. And once it's published, it is now available across your organization, depending on the permissions that you've set. So you could just create this for yourself and you are the only person that could access it. But if you're going to build something like this HR policy agent, super beneficial to probably everybody at the company. So you're going to want to make sure that it's published enterprise wide, and you're going to want to make sure that it's accessible in a way where employees can actually leverage that agent. So lots of different places where you could actually publish that. For this example, you know what? I probably want to publish it in either Copilot or Microsoft Teams. So you would come in through channels. It is now on Teams. I can see what that looks like here. I'm going to tell it to stay in Windows so you guys can see it. And what you should see in a moment is here it is. Here's Teams in a different window. Um, and it is available right here. So I have that agent. I can just in this interface ask those same questions. So let's test this one out. Let's ask the same question we asked in testing, and let's hope that it provides the same answer. So let's see. And it's going to say, hey, connect. So I'm allowing it to access the knowledge. And now, come on, Teams, don't leave me hanging here. Let's line things up. Cool. And it provides the same answer with the same link to the resource. So now you deploy this across your organization and you've saved your poor HR manager probably countless hours not having to answer the same question around parental leave over and over and over again. So that's our agent for this week. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can come off and let's ask some questions. Cool. So while I wait for anybody to ask whatever questions they have here, I did want to quickly point out that when I went through the example in the Reejig platform, where I showed you that work visibility, where it's like, hey, here are all the tasks and subtasks and all of that goodness that's happening across your organization. We actually have made that available. So a version of that where you can see the work down to the task and subtask level for everybody that's in this session. So I know a few of you in previous weeks have requested your little snapshot, your little version of the AI impact analysis. But those of you who have not requested that already, please feel free to use the link. Kelly, if you can drop the link in for the AI impact analysis, request your own version of it. And then what we'll do is we'll have one of our workforce strategists send it to you via email and then reach out and they can walk you through it to show you, hey, here's the work that we're seeing, across your industry. And here are the areas where we've seen a lot of companies automate or sort of reimagine, reinvent those workflows. So it at least will give you some visibility into where you can maybe go back to your team and say, hey, we should maybe build this AI workflow for this specific task and subtask set. So it's free. We don't charge anything for it. Um, highly, highly recommend requesting your copy of it. And yeah. So any questions, Kelly? I don't see any that are popping in. So
No, I don't see any questions. Yeah, like you said, Jeff, I dropped the links of helpful resources. Uh,
awesome.
but yeah, I
So
don't see
So I
any.
think we're good. So unless, and I'll offer it up. Like, does anybody have any questions not related to building these agents? Anybody have any just general AI questions that you um, are curious about? Happy to answer those as well. If not, I will give everyone 12 minutes back for their Thursday. And I want to thank everybody for spending some time with me. I enjoy
Jeff,
doing these. Yep.
I did also mention, I put your LinkedIn in
Oh
there.
yeah,
That's a great source for anybody to stay up to date in the latest episodes, insights with Jeff on AI. But I know
love it.
you're very active in LinkedIn, so anybody can reach out that way as well.
Yeah, definitely connect with me. A lot of you have already. Connect with me. You can ask questions there. Um, I love chatting about this stuff too, so it's super fun. And when we send the follow-up email, so we'll send you a copy of the recording, some other goodies. Again, we're always trying to make these sessions better. So if there's like a specific topic or something that you want us to build, like give that feedback back to me. I see everything that comes back in. Um, let us know. Does this format work? Do you have any recommendations for something else that you'd like to see? Do you want us to potentially host? One of the things we're thinking about hosting in the future is more or less almost like just like a fireside chat where we don't have slides. We come in, I'll bring a topic, and then we'll learn a lot about how you guys are leveraging AI within your organizations. I think those conversations typically go pretty well. So if that's something that's of interest, let us know. But other than that, enjoy your today's Thursday, I think. Enjoy your Thursday, and hopefully we'll see you guys in the next few sessions that are coming up. So thank you very much, guys. We'll see you soon. Have a great day. Talk soon.